You're in the classroom with Cat Vo. In the Classroom is a podcast where we talk about all things teaching and learning, education and research. Join me as I sit down with everyday educators and explore what's going on in the field and what this means for sustaining us as teachers in the classroom. Today's special guest is Associate Professor Melissa Fanshawe. Melissa is a dedicated practitioner, researcher and advocate for inclusive education. With over 25 years of experience in Queensland schools, she now teaches pre-service teachers at the University of Southern Queensland, focusing on access, inclusion and technology-enhanced learning. Melissa specialises in support for students with blindness and low vision, and we're so excited to have her share her insights and expertise on the podcast today. You're listening to In the Classroom. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Alrighty, everybody. So we're in the classroom today with Associate Professor Melissa Fanshawe. Melissa, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you here, Melissa. So why don't you start by telling our guests a bit about yourself and your journey into education?
I'm an Associate Professor in the School of Education at the University of Southern Queensland, but I've also got 25 years experience in schools, mainly in the primary classroom. I've also worked in secondary schools, TAFE, and in special education, and as an advisory teacher and a principal. So I think this is really important to me in my identity now as a lecturer in the university, because I really like to provide that understanding of a classroom, and I bring this experience with many real-life examples to support pre-service teachers.
Yeah, so let's dive into that a bit more. I understand that your work at the moment is heavily focused on inclusive education, and that's been a big part of your work over the years. So what is it about inclusive education that you'd like us teachers to really be cognizant of as we're in the classrooms on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I just think that every child is different, which represents how we are in the community. We're all really different. And sometimes when we start putting a label on every child and say, well, this child might have autism or this child might have different needs, then it makes that child different. And for me, I love to think that everybody is the same, but we all have different ways of learning and different things that we enjoy. And I like to think of that none of our diversities are a disadvantage, and they're all things that make us special and make us different learners. So for me, inclusive education is really important and totally different than special education because it's about focusing on diversity that we all have. I'm really passionate about it because I want every child and every person to have access to education. Sometimes that's really hard for some students, and they just need us as teachers to understand that they're important, we're all different, and we all add so much value to each other.
So where can we start with that? I think there are so many misconceptions about inclusive education in schools, I'd say, from the point of view that we often see it as a process as part of the national collection of, data as part of the NCCD work, and that administrative side can often take away and make teachers, well, I guess for myself, I can't speak on behalf of all teachers, but it can often be quite an administrative process that is seen as a burden. And so how can teachers be thinking differently about inclusive education, that it's not just an administrative task, it's actually about, as you say, giving every single student an opportunity?
Oh, yes, I really agree with you. I think the concept of inclusive education as a way of thinking about diversity in our classroom and inclusive education as additional paperwork is really a thing. It has become a burden on us all to do the paperwork and fill in the forms, which is added to our workloads in our classroom. But what if we didn't need to do the paperwork because our pedagogical approach or our mindset was that these are all young people in our classroom, and how is it that we can get them to access education? Because the end goal is we want them to be really successful people in their lives and to be able to participate in the community. And we will play a small role in preparing students for employment by providing equitable access to education. So if inclusive education was more of a mindset or a philosophy around what we can do to get access to education, then I think, that's just a different way of doing it. So I'll give you an example. One thing that I've been doing, which is really exciting lately, is I've been training teachers to use LEGO Braille Bricks. Well, we all know, and many of us love Lego. Well, the Lego Foundation came out with a really clever way of supporting inclusion of Braille literacy in the classroom called LEGO Braille Bricks. So they're Legos and they have Braille on them. And they've also got letters or numbers, which represent the print version of what the Braille is on the Lego. And so students who are learning Braille can feel the Braille on the brick, and the people in the classroom who can see can use the print. So students with blindness and low vision can join together with sighted students and they can do literacy together. So it's a lot of fun things can be incorporated into the classroom, like they can make spelling words or sending it to each other. And all of those things bring the children together collaboratively. So they're all doing things in the same way. But it's just much more than teaching Braille. It's teaching everybody in the classroom that the community, people use Braille for literacy. And so therefore, our students are learning about different ways of reading and writing. So I think for me, inclusion is what sort of ways we can do things to show our classrooms and all of the students in it that we do things differently. And in society, we're all different. And diversity is a fabulous thing.
I just love that. I mean, our conversation has just started with that, like, mindset shift that has to take place. And then we're thinking about, once that shift has taken place, it's about the classroom design. And I would love to unpack more of that with you and pick your brain around that. How else have you seen inclusive education done not only through Lego for literacy, but through, a variety of other ways? How have you seen that take place in the classroom?
Oh, thank you for asking. I was so fortunate to actually go out and do my country service when I finished my teaching degree, which was closer to 30 years ago, but we won't talk about that. So I got into the country and I had a lot of different jobs. I was a classroom teacher and then I got to work in a special education unit. Then I was an advisory teacher for adaptive technology. And later on, I ran a learning and development centre for gifted and talented. I was an advisory teacher, principal, all of those things. But in my job in the Learning and Development Centre for Gifted and Talented, I really loved being able to differentiate for different students. So we had students with different abilities. We had lower abilities, higher abilities. And some of the things I used to love was that we could change up our classroom. Like, what can we do to learn and what can we do to teach differently? And I've got an example of there was this one student in my classroom and he actually won a NAFLAN prize for mathematics. So that's the level of him. And even though I teach mathematics at the uni, he came up with this formula and everybody in the class was like, oh, I don't know. Is it true? Is it not? And so we didn't know. I didn't have to be the expert. And we all said I said to the class, well, let's go and test it. Like, how do we know if it's true? I'm not sure if it is. It could be, it might not be. Let's go test it. And that sparked curiosity. And also not me as the teacher, not being the expert, but the whole class having a look into it. And so we tested this formula and we couldn't disprove it. And we said, well, that's awesome. And you're probably onto something. So we actually sent it out to some other schools and they had a look into it too. And no one yet has been able to disprove it. But it's not always about the teacher teaching. So I really loved that in the classroom, that we could do things in a different way. And secondly, it's about working out ways in your classroom to teach things in different ways. So another thing I really love and I've used a lot is called a question matrix. You can go on Google and have a look. I'm sure you'll find lots of different things. But when you're learning about something, you can go and ask some questions on it and there'll be different levels of thinking. So for example, if we were learning about the Olympics, we could ask some lower level questions like, when did the Olympics start? Why do we have Olympics? And they're low level questions. They're really just finding out the answer. The sort of high level questions might be, what sport should be added to the Olympics and why? Or what should Olympians eat? And where should they stay during this time? The best financial impact. So I think that the question matrix enables us to provide a lot of differentiation for all of these students in our class to learn. And I think it fits in very nicely with the Australian curriculum because the Australian curriculum is specific but also general. And it is designed to be able to include everybody in the classroom. And when we create lessons that are fun, creative, and sparking curiosity, we can meet the needs of all of our students.
Love that. And I think a huge part of your work, as you say, is not always about the teacher teaching, but it's also about being open to hearing the student's voice in the classroom and actually to listen to the students and what they are telling us about what they need. And so can you provide a bit more insight into how can teachers tap into that for students and not assume and not take the assumption pathway? What does that look like?
Right. Well, I'm going to preface that by something that you said before about teachers not having time, because as you say, in the classroom, it's really hard to find time to do anything extra. We've got so much to do to meet the curriculum, and we've got extra reports and all of the types of things that we need to do. So sometimes it's just really hard to step back to listen to our students and what they need and what they want. But I think when you find something that a student's interested in or a way that they enjoy learning in your classroom as a whole, then you suddenly get them motivated and they're keen to learn. And it's something you can tap into. Like I'll say, what did you love about this? And students will give me feedback and tell me. And from that, you can design activities that center around the things that really get the class engaged and motivated. And usually within that, if students are having a little bit of fun, I mean, we can't have fun all the time, but if we're engaged in our learning because the learning activities have been created to the level where they challenge everybody, but they're also accessible to everybody, then that's when I think we get the kids engaged. And it's in, this big term in education called differentiation.
I want to touch a bit about what you mentioned before about this big term in education called differentiation. And I think often as a teacher, I need a refresher course in the multitude of ways in which teachers can differentiate. And so can you unpack that for me in terms of differentiation as a concept? Like what does that actually entail for teachers?
Oh, thank you for asking that, Kat, because there are a lot of different people who talk about differentiation. But for me, I really like the way that Tomlinson talks about differentiation. And because I like to start with a universal design for learning. So I like to set up my classroom with content and assessment that most of the students can understand and can do. And of course, we may have to have a response to intervention for some students, but if we can set it up for most of the students, that's what's important. So I think about the content and what has to be learned. So obviously we're using the Australian curriculum and we're setting up the content around that. But going back to my Olympics example that I gave earlier, some of those questions might be easier and harder, and students can build on those and hear about what else other people are doing, and then they start learning, sparking curiosity and learning about new things. The second one is the process or how it is learned. So, like I said before, can that be learning through doing? So, they might be making something, they might be having peer conferences or interviewing them. And the way that they learn, finding out the way that students learn and do it that way, or giving them options so they can choose a number of different ways is also very useful. The product or how the learning is demonstrated, I think, is also very important. So, for example, something, if we go back to the Olympics, they might put their knowledge in an essay, or it could be auditory. They could do their own little podcast. Or could it be that they're actually making a website? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of different ways that you can share your knowledge. And we as teachers tend to say or dictate we do that because we go to the Australian curriculum and I think, read it in a way of how we think it's supposed to be and what that content descriptor is wanting us to do. But actually, when I read it, I think that we can open it up to a lot of different ways of doing it. So that's something for me. And then there's the learning environment. How do we set up our learning environment to be safe and supportive for all of our students so that they feel that they can try for harder things, or it's okay to require support and to have some support from the teachers as well. So I think that's for me what differentiation is all about. And as I mentioned before, I like to set up that universal design for learning. So if I can set up my class with that differentiation, there will be some students who need adjustment. So for example, if we have a child who's deaf or hard of hearing, we might be able to have captions in our multimedia. But if we do that, like I know when I'm watching the TV that the captions help me and my hearing is reasonably good. A lot of the things that we can do to make modifications for that one student will actually help a lot. So let's not just say to the student, here you go, I made this for you for captions. You say, I've decided to put captions on this for everybody because I think that that's celebrating how different people learn. And I think it's just really interesting.
You're just giving me a lot to think about right now, Melissa. I feel like I taught a class this afternoon, actually, and I was just thinking about this reliance upon writing, like this expectation that students can only process things when they write. And to me, it was period 4, end of the day. The last thing my students want to do is write, and consciously thinking about the different modes and the different ways in which they can present their understandings and think through the learning is so different. And I just want to thank you for reminding me of that, of the opportunities there are on a daily basis to do that. And so, we spoke about UDL and about universal design for learning and thinking through that. Can you apply it in a classroom for me in, let's say, a mathematical setting? Like tomorrow, if Melissa Fanshawe was to go in a classroom teaching maths, what are your top key considerations as you're planning a lesson?
Oh, that would be fun. I'd love to come into your classroom tomorrow and teach math. But my key considerations for my planning is obviously thinking about the Australian professional standards for teachers is number one, I need to know my students. So I'd love you to tell me about your students and how they learn. And that would be so important for me. Secondly, I need to know the curriculum and what I'm going to teach. So what curriculum content description you're going to give me. And when you've given me that, I'm always going to look at the year before and the year after. So I can look at what it is, where they've come from, what have they learned beforehand, but also what they're going to need to know next. Because it's really important to me when I'm in the classroom that I know what they've done and I know where they're going. Then I'm going to find a really cool stimulus because I like to get the kids excited. So I'm probably going to teach probability and statistics because it's my very favorite math concept, which, by the way, a lot of teachers leave out because they find it a little bit difficult. And so they often don't teach it, but I really love it. So I'm going to find a cool fact, and I actually know one. The other day, I found out Skittles were advertising that their little different packets of Skittles are all individual. And that if you get a packet of Skittles, a little packet, that they're all different from the others. So going back to my inclusive education theme, like I love the fact that they're all different. But there was a man on YouTube that was claiming that they're not as different as Skittles is claiming. Because if you've only got a certain number of colors and you've only got a certain number of Skittles in the packet, they can't be that different. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this would be so much fun in the classroom if we could just open up our Skittles and have a look. Now, not every school can have Skittles, so I do agree with that. And what I would probably do is create a little Skittles packet and put some little blocks in them of different colors. But that would be a lot of fun as well. And we're going to find out what's in our Skittle packet. Now, the best way to do that would be to have to make a graph out of them. And so that would help everybody to be able to do the same activity, but they've actually got different colors and different things in there. But anyway, I love manipulatives because you can actually use them to make things easier or harder as well, because having manipulatives enables these students to be able to make the graph and then to copy the graph. Whereas the students who are really good at that, they might not need the manipulatives to do that, but the other students do. So we're providing that opportunity and the strategies to help everybody to be able to learn. So, okay, I've got these Skittles, we've made some graphs, and we can actually compare and have a look at those graphs. And one thing I love to do in a classroom is a strategy walk. And the reason I think that a strategy walk is so important is we often tell students to do something, but then we come around, we tick their work, and they don't see anybody else's. But why can't they go around and have a look at what everybody else has done? Because that might help improve themselves as well. And I think that opportunity is really important to share to show our strategies and show each other how to do things better, because that's how we get better. So that's what my classroom would be like teaching maths. It would be purposely designed to have everybody engaged, everybody physically doing something, and people being able to have choices about what they're doing. And then when we finish that, I'd make them reflect on it, and I might make them write about it, or I might get them to do a podcast about it, because remember that product can be however it comes to for the students. So not everybody in their career wants to write, so we can have it come out how they would like it to. And I just hope that my classroom would be authentic and genuine, and that the students feel that it resonates. And I think that they'd light up their little faces seeing the packets of Skittles being distributed in the classroom, or not in every classroom, but that would be something that would make me very happy coming in to teach. And one more thing that I would do in your classroom is something which is called a tiered approach to learning. So when I tell the students to go off and make a graph, I recognize that some of your students would know how to make a graph and others may not. So what I would do is that those students who feel confident with making a graph and with what I've told them to do, they can just start going off and doing it by themselves. If the students would like to do one with me, and just to make sure they're on the right track, I'd sit there with them and do one. And then if they feel confident, they can go off. And there may be some students who do one with me. And it's really funny with this, because some of the students who may have gone off and who maybe shouldn't have gone off, they'll probably just be listening in and checking that they're on the right track. And they're like, yep, that's it. I'm good. I'm good. So that's another important thing, is that in the classroom, by doing it like that, I'm sneakily supporting the students by doing another one with them. But I'm also helping to build the confidence of people to go off and do it by themselves if they feel keen. And if they don't know, they can listen with me and do it. And that's really about making sure that every student feels included and that they belong, but also that they have the agency and a choice to go off and do it for themselves.
I love that so much. And I just love how just authentic and genuine that feels, and just how it can just resonate with students. I'm sure that it would just light up their faces. Can I pivot the conversation to the role of technology and different digital tools and resources in that space? With the explosion of AI as well, how have you seen this field shift, or are there any particular changes that you've noticed with how we can make the classroom more inclusive for our students with AI?
AI is fabulous for inclusion, because it's a fun fact that I've worked in special education and I'm a trained teacher of children who are blind or have low vision. And then 3 years later, I actually had a son who was born legally blind. And so a lot of people go into a field of disability because they've had a child with a disability. But for me, it was the other way around. I was working in blindness and low vision, and then I had a child with blindness and low vision. And I was like, okay, I'm good with that. I'm fully trained. But through this, I've actually learned a lot about assistive technology and adaptive technology. And my son came to me the other day and he said, do you know that you can ask AI what to have if you've got a cold? And I'm like, oh, okay. And so he said, hey, I've got a cold. What sort of things should I have to get better? And then he uploaded a picture of a box because he wasn't able to read what was on it. And AI said, yes, this is the right thing. You should have it with orange juice. So it was giving him instructions about what was on the box, what the box said, and what he should do. So AI is also fabulous for learning. Think about just something as simple as Grammarly and how it can help a person or a student construct a sentence. And that's really important for people with dyslexia, to construct a sentence that is well spoken and presents what they're trying to get across. Because at the end of the day, that's what communication is. It's about communicating regardless of how you actually get to it. So I feel like AI is really able to support students to be able to do what they want to do. And the other thing I love about AI is it can tell you so much information. You can just ask it a question and it will tell you the answer. And it doesn't work for everything, but it has so much potential that we shouldn't be scared of it and say, let's not use AI because some students may have an unfair advantage. But if we're going to use AI, I think we need to teach all of our students how to use it ethically and responsibly. And so that may include some learning of how to do it, how to program it. And I'll go back to a story of my grade 2 class. So it was at the beginning of the year, and it was in my grade 2 class, and we were in the computer lab, and we'd been doing some graphing. And I said, okay, we're going to go down and use Microsoft Excel, and I'm going to teach you how to put this data in, and then you'll be able to right click on the table and it'll make a graph. And then this boy, he just uploads it into AI and said, it'll make a graph for you. So we had all of these great tools that everybody was exploring using AI, using Excel and some other programs, and just making all these different types of graphs. And I could have said, no, we're doing it my way. This is how I'm teaching you. But how much more fun is it when they can explore and use all of the tools that they are? So we had all these different graphs, but the excitement, the students were really thinking about what can we find out and what can we do. And then there were a couple of little experts running around the room, helping out those students who weren't quite as sure about the AI. But I think that there's a lot more to come from AI. We also need to teach children how to look at it critically and make sure that what they've uploaded is actually what they've got out as well.
I think for teachers that want to develop their professional knowledge and understanding of inclusive education in this space, what are some resources or networks that you would suggest teachers undertake or pursue?
Oh, there's a great website called ADSET. So it's the Australian Development Centre of Education and Training. And there's a lot of brilliant resources for inclusivity. I think it's the best website that I love to use. And for me, though, one of the things in inclusive education is the mindset. So I want to think about students. I want to think about how I can set up my classroom to celebrate diversity and to create content and processes, products, and an environment that everybody can learn in best. And we're all different. And how can I encourage all those ways of learning? And one of the best resources that I've found for inclusivity is actually the students themselves. How do you work? How do you love to learn? And in secondary, you might be able to do a survey at the beginning of the year, and they can, you can ask them questions about, what would you like to learn about? How do you like to learn? In primary classrooms, I do a lot by observation of the students and how they do things, or you could introduce each other. But I think finding out for the students, it's so important. They really do love to share.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's just a different way of rethinking the overdone survey at times, I find, when it comes to secondary school students. But I do think that it is so important, and I'd like to thank you for sharing that. And so to close, Melissa, how do you stay hopeful and encouraged in this space? I mean, you've taught for so long. How many years you've taught now? You're also in the field as an academic. What's keeping you in this space in, the profession, and what would you like to encourage teachers with?
Oh, I think teachers have such an important job because everybody in our community we can influence. Anybody who becomes a doctor, a truck driver, a lawyer, the next prime minister, one of us has taught them. So our job is so incredibly powerful. And I think it's our job to encourage people to be the best person they can be and the best at whatever they choose to be, but also to feel loved and cared for, like they belong, and that their differences are celebrated in our community. So for me, that's what I think is really wonderful.
Thanks for listening to this episode of In the Classroom. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, rate me 5 stars, and leave a review. Don't forget to share this episode with anyone who might find it inspiring. That's all from me, and I'll see you next episode. Thanks for listening to In the Classroom.